Hey, everybody, this is Kevin Guillen here with another episode of the Western Hunter Podcast. We are super excited today. We have a great guest here, Eric Stecker. He is with McMillan Stocks and Defiance Actions, which I'm sure many of you listeners are very familiar with those brands. If you're not, you will be more by the end of today. Also here is Brody, our beloved co-host or host on most episodes. And we've got a lot of ground to cover, just, story who Eric is, learn more about the products that he brought with us today or with him today, and learn more about these awesome actions and beautiful stocks. So with that, Eric, how's it going?
It's going great. Great. Thanks for having me, Kevin. Brody, thank you so much. Appreciate being here.
Yeah, so Eric, you and I've met a couple times, but just really in passing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I did a tour of the McMillan facility, which is right here in North Phoenix, which is great. We actually are really fortunate here in Fountain Hills. We've got a lot of awesome companies here in the Valley, McMillan being one of them. So I met with Varian, did a tour, and wrote an article in the magazine really just highlighting the team story, the company story, and kind of the product process a little bit about McMillan. We met then briefly, and then I think we also crossed paths at this year's NRL Hunter Grand Slam. So there was a lot of people there, a lot going on. So
Right, busy match, yeah.
Yeah, we probably barely recognized my face, but in any case, I'm really grateful you came down today. And I personally, and I know Brody feels the same way. We really just wanted to kind of get to know you first, a little bit more about your background, how you got to be in this position, and what you do for these incredible brands.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I started in the firearms industry very young compared to a lot of people. I worked for Walt Berger in Berger Bullets when I first started, and I actually met his granddaughter. I met her in school when I was in high school, and we hit it off, and one thing led to another, and Walt, he ran the bench rest matches out at the Ben Avery shooting range. And, I needed a little extra money. And so I was out there running target crew, eventually ended up running the matches as a range master. And he asked me one day if I wanted to help him at his shop, at his house, which was in a shed in his backyard. And one thing led to another, and the shorter version of that story is I ended up becoming the president of Berger Bullets and was with Berger Bullets for
Cut two.
30 years.
Yeah, very quick.
I was there for a very long time and really enjoyed it. Very much enjoyed shooting and enjoyed competition. I was in bench rest and F-class competition. And during that period of time, the focus was just trying to make the best product we could make. And during that, during my experience with Berger, one of the things that we did for as Berger started doing was making hunting bullets. And it was through that making of hunting bullets that we ended up sponsoring a television show to promote the hunting bullets. And one of the shows that we sponsored was done and hosted by a guy by the name of Bob Beck. And Bob is an avid outdoorsman, hunter, great shooter, very much into long-range shooting. Berger started making bullets before any long-nosed bullets were out there. The very first long-nosed bullet that Berger made was a 105 6mm, and its nose was longer than the SAMI industry spec would allow. And so they had to make special barrels. They had to make special setups. And so it wasn't something that everybody could just do naturally. Well, through Brian Litz got involved with Berger Bullets, certainly one of the most influential people in the aspect of shooting.
Still to this day.
And what he did to bring a new kind of bullet performance into the market, he was a huge part of that. Well, because we started getting involved in hunting bullets, we started getting involved in long-range shooting. Bob was a big part of that because he understood how to set these rifles up with long chambers, with bigger boxes. He got it immediately, and he very much liked the long-range hunting. And so his show was called Extreme Outer Limits, and the notion was, you're out hunting on the edge, hunting on the edge of performance. And back then, that was the literal edge of performance, and there were a lot of folks that even questioned the act of shooting past 200 yards was, something that was taboo at the time.
Yeah.
Well, so it went very well. As we know now, now long-range shooting is much more common. Long nose bullets are everybody makes them, all the different brands. Mm-hmm. And so, but Bob, in promoting all of these things, we became very good friends, and he worked very hard at all of this. Well, there was an opportunity, things that were going very well at Burger. There was an opportunity for us to partner with Namo, which owns La Pua and Vitivori and SK. And it was a great opportunity. And the idea of combining, these huge notions, Burger Bullets and its quality with La Pua and its, it's all its great things seemed like a good idea at the time. Long story short, things don't always go the way that you imagine them to. And within a relatively short period of time, a couple years, it made sense that Namo was going in one direction with the company, and I respected them for doing that. They had the keys, they were the owners. So I decided that it wasn't really a great fit for me anymore. I was sort of banging my head against the wall. It didn't make a lot of sense for me to stay, and so I left. And at that point, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I had done pretty well with Burger, and because I was a minority share owner at the time, things worked out that way. And so I decided to leave. Well, the short version is I did not process not doing things very well. Not being active, not having purpose, all that stuff just didn't do very well for me. I spent a little time in real estate thinking I was going to do it like a half a hobby, and that was just a huge mistake. And anybody that does real estate knows that you don't do it halfway.
Yeah,
not seriously, right? Yeah, not seriously anyway. So. I really was sort of looking for something to do and wasn't really sure what that was going to be. And it just so happens that at the time I was getting in a little bit into Facebook. I'm not a social media guy for the most part, but I was on Facebook because I was staying connected with friends. And Kelly McMillan just happened to have an ad out saying that he was looking for somebody to answer phones. Well, I had made bullets my whole life. And so I wasn't a stock maker. I didn't have any ambitions of, I need to be the head guy or anything like that. So I'm just like, I just wanted something to do. So I gave him a call. And, one thing led to another. And the next thing I know, I'm in McMillan and I'm answering phone calls and I'm helping people with stocks. And it's just one of those things where I've always been the kind of person that just sort of looks around and takes it in. And to say that I got it, I understood what was going on. I had an awareness of some things. And so I just started asking questions and started getting a little closer to Kelly. And I knew Kelly from before. He was very much involved. There was a group of us that sort of had like-minded notions. And between Night Force, the guy Kyle at Night Force, and Kelly at McMillan, and Bob and the TV shows, we all sort of ran around together. So I knew him pretty well.
Gotcha.
But long story short, it made sense after a little while with Kelly and I talking that he wanted me to become more involved, more significantly involved, and help him with the operation. And so he wanted me to be the GM. And so that was fine, So I have a lot of business background. I won't bore everybody, but when I was with Burger, the company that the family that owned it, they owned a number of companies. And it was part of our monthly meetings where we did financial reviews of all the companies. So I have an extensive amount of time spent reviewing financials of other companies. And so it just sort of fit that I understood how all these companies worked, even if I wasn't necessarily a stock maker, a dyed-in-the-wool, long-time stock
You're
maker.
more like my wife, who runs the numbers, the spreadsheets, and understands how the businesses actually stay alive.
Well, and it's remarkably, I might not surprise anybody in this room, but it's remarkably formulaic. There are some things that you can't, there are some strategies and some things you can take chances on, but there are some things you really can't violate and some things you really need to watch for that are fairly consistent from business to business. Make more money, spend less money. Some of those,
exactly.
but you have to have ways to watch those things, and you have to have gauges that you follow, and all this kind of stuff. So anyway,
I share an office with our CFO, Ryan. And so every once in a while I'll ask him a question, about those formula type things. And I guess I have like a very cursory understanding of those rules and those processes that can't be broken. And, otherwise the wheels start to fall off.
Yeah, it starts sounding like Chinese to me very quickly. And I think that's why like guys in people in the hunting industry and shooting industry, like they get into they make something, you make a stock or make an action, and you're like, I'm going to make a company out of this. And these people aren't business people. They're just guys who like to go shoot and they happen to have a pretty good idea. And I think that's when you kind of get into like, hey, you're not following some very simple rules here that to keep this thing going for a long term.
Yeah. Well, and those things are very much a structure, just like any solid structure. Any building has 2x4s and braces and all that kind of stuff, but there are businesses have basically required practices that if you follow them, then the structure stays in place, and then you can do things inside of it and around it and with it. But if you violate those things, you're basically tearing the supports out of your walls, and you can do that at your peril if you're not careful. So it's that was the primary thing that I brought to the discussion related to McMillan. Well, at the same time, Bob, who, like I said, was also a friend of ours and was involved with the different people, he had been talking to Kelly about, at one point, buying McMillan when Kelly was good and ready. Now, Kelly was one of the older guys in the group, so when he was good and ready, it made sense for him to do that. Well, now I'm there. So Bob lived up in Oregon. He's in Wyoming now, so he's a bit further away. I'm in the valley. I provide a good person for Bob to have around when he's not physically there, and it seemed like a smart thing to do for him to go ahead and move that forward. So, after took us about a year. Took them about a year to work out the details. I got involved to some degree, and then Bob ended up with McMillan. And so we started, so that I was already the general manager under Kelly. And so it just continued that way. And so we started working with McMillan. Well, it was part of the conversation pretty quickly as to, what are we going to do? What vision do we have? What exciting thing are we going to do with the market? Are we just going to be McMillan? And so the idea was, well, Bob had been a rifle builder for the majority of his career. Well, he also hosted and did other things, but he had a rifle building company. And so he knew the pains of being a rifle builder, and he liked the idea of owning the components that make rifles and being able to supply those people, because he knew of the frustrations that rifle builders had as he was building rifles. And he thought, well, if we could be the people who supplied those folks, we would have a stronger ability to do that, because we know so well the troubles that they face. Yeah. And so made a lot of sense. And so it was in our heads that we would add an action brand, add a barrel brand. Yeah. I mean, we've talked about triggers and scopes, but nobody's excited about that right now. Those are a little more complicated. Sure. Mm-hmm. Those worlds are a little bit different, but certainly stocks, actions, and barrels. Those were always pretty much on the radar. Well, so it wasn't too long after we got McMillan that we were contacted by one of the top folks at Defiance. Now, this was particularly exciting because when we considered being involved in an action company, there's certain action brands that are larger and some that are smaller, some that are up-and-comers, some that have been around for a while. And so we had our expectations set for one of the smaller ones, one of the ones that maybe is a sort of a new brand, and we felt we needed to do something with. That the established brands would be harder because they wouldn't be interested. Mm-hmm. Well, when we were contacted by Defiance, the initial conversation was simply that we wanted to strengthen the relationship, I think is what was being discussed. But then when they actually came over and we sat down and talked, what we learned was that they were actually looking for investors. Now, there was a whole other thing going on with Defiance that we didn't want to be a part of in terms of just continued long-term risk and pouring more money down something that we didn't have any control over. Right. But it became very clear very quickly in the conversation that there was an equity interest. There was a possibility of us becoming part owner of the company. And this immediately was interesting because now McMillan, the number one action that it inlets for is actually Browning, because McMillan makes quite a few stocks for Browning. Mm-hmm. We make a number of stocks for the different.
Got a handful of them here.
I killed my Kodiak one with it was that McMillan X-Bolt long range. I think that was a few years old. Yeah.
So that's
favorite stock I've ever shot in the Browning for
that's
sure.
Right.
Well, that's the number one, but that's a lot of those stocks go straight to Browning. So that's the number one. Number two is the Defiance, and so I was like, oh my gosh, this is a major brand, very large scale, at least in terms of folks that were buying McMillan were using the Defiance actions. And so it just made a lot of sense. So we started getting into it, and I won't get deep into the weeds, but let's just say it was a challenging deal. There were some aspects of it that where the people who actually had controlling interest of the company were very eager to sell. There were some folks that had a very small minority share interest that weren't as eager to sell.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a period where we had to deal with that process. That creates its own set of requirements. And so we had to wait for that to happen. And so by the time we got to the point where we could actually take the keys, the situation had changed quite a lot. And there's a very I go into this very deeply on the Eric Cortina's podcast. There's episode 122. I refer to it because it's got. I even posted all the specific numbers and stuff.
I read a bunch of that.
Okay,
I read a bunch of that. Yeah, that's why I was curious to hear your take on it.
Well, I do go deep in the weeds there, but the shorter version is. Basically, when we ended up with the company was pointed at the ground, and it was in very real trouble. Mm-hmm. And so our solution, based on all my experience and based on the circumstance at the time, was to make a very aggressive price change. Mm-hmm. And the mistake that I made, that I'll admit to anybody at any point, is we made the price retro. So that means that people who ordered an action yesterday for a price that was X, they were going to have to pay more than they were told to cover that action. And the reason for that is because we needed cash. The company was out of cash.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it was very close to closing. Mm-hmm. So from a survivability point of view, it was the absolute right thing to do. From a brand reputation and how people felt about it, it was the absolute wrong thing to do. And if I could hit reset, there were some ways, so there were some things that we could have done in terms of bringing in more cash. But when you're in that situation, if you don't make the situation work with what you have and you pour more money into it, you could very well be risking all that additional money too. Yeah. And so if you're already risking a lot, then it makes sense. Well, let's save this before we even put more into this fire and then burn the whole pile up.
Yeah.
And so, because we weren't entirely sure that this was going to work. And so we took an enormous risk. Well, the good news is going forward is that everything worked out.
Yeah.
We certainly did upset some people, and we actively engage with those folks. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by actively, it's not one of these, oh, we're so sorry, and then you with the letter, and there's a South Park,
sure. Corporate version
right?
Of it.
Yeah, it's none of that.
Yeah,
we reached out to them because we knew exactly what they had ordered. We knew what they had paid. We knew exactly how much money that this cost these folks, and so we reached out to them. We said, okay, this is how much it cost you. We understand that we created some additional burden in your life. We'd like to offer this, and they were, big amounts off on actions, some free actions, or whatever it took for us to literally pay that back.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Because we didn't want them to feel like we did it on their backs. That was never the intent. Mm-hmm. It was never the intent to do it on anybody's backs. We were trying to survive an S storm. And we made some choices that didn't go well. And then I stood behind those choices in the sense, because it was my recommendation that we do that. Bob trusts me. He understands that I've been in the finance part of this for a while. Okay, let's go for it. We went forward and did what we did, and now we've made it right. So now that was coming up on 3 years now ago. Mm-hmm. And so now all that's pretty much cleared up. There's a few folks that have could probably say a few harsh words about us, but for the most part,
you can't please everybody.
We've dealt with that in a number of phases between my time with Outdoorsman's and Wilderness Athlete, where we've had to go through price changes. I mean, obviously the economy has dictated that too. Raw materials, labor, just about damn near everything. Employee insurance, everything has gone up. But yeah, you get to that point where, obviously one of our main purposes is to serve our community and serve our customers to the best of our ability. But one of our other big, and some people don't love to hear this, although they should understand it, is that one of our other big responsibilities is to employ people, is to keep this thing running, to keep food on the table for the people that work here, that make these products, and to be able to continue to provide a very high caliber product, whether that's an action, a stock, a tripod, a supplement, for the community. Because, while a customer may be kind of miffed that his price went up, and I understand the retroactive thing, that's a bit tough to swallow for a lot of people, especially when you're talking about the value of an action. But, what's the alternative if you were to ask that person? Well, would you rather us just go away? Would you rather this be the very last transaction we ever make as a business then? I mean, so yeah, there's a lot of considerations that are tough to navigate. And as Brody said, you just rarely can ever please everybody. Maybe never.
No, you can't. And I think customers now, because consumers now, they've seen price increases in everything. It's kind of become maybe a little bit easier on it. Like they kind of understand it a little bit more. They kind of understand what's going on. And some of them even realize like, oh, I'm not going to be able to get, whether it be an action or a tripod, I'm not going to be able to get one that's this kind of quality if we don't pay this price,
Right.
Going forward.
Well, and I agree with you guys. One of the things that I think some people get it, some people don't. I think it's something you really know if you're an industry insider, is that it's been my experience. Now, I started in the firearms industry in 1990, so I've been in the firearms industry for a very long time. Met a lot of people, seen things come and go. And one of the things that I believe is consistent in the firearms industry is the vast majority of people that are in the firearms industry at all levels, from ownership to head management to middle management to the folks on the floor, are mostly made up of people who are passionate about the shooting sports. And the reason why that's relevant is because I'm not aware of anybody who's just killing it and making money hand over fist, right?
Yeah.
And they're just taking advantage of everybody while they're just racking in the money and driving. What I see is you got a lot of people that are doing the best they can to get by. And there are people living comfortable lives, and that's fair. They're working hard. But they're doing what they're doing because they really do enjoy it. Yeah. And they really do enjoy how people interact with their products. And they really do enjoy those kinds of things. Now, and there are situations where you never know all your customers, and you never know you never see all the experiences actually happen, but you're in it for a reason. Like I really got excited about bullets primarily because I was excited about being in the military. I wanted to serve my country, and now I was born with a heart issue that resulted in me getting an artificial heart valve, so I couldn't get into the military directly. But I saw an opportunity, and I didn't know it was coming my way. But when it did land in front of me, I was extremely passionate about getting involved in the bullet world because what I saw was an opportunity for me to do something that helps the guy in the field.
Yeah.
Now, it took decades for a burger to actually become a product that was used in the field, but that's why I was so excited about it all the time. And to me, I've hunted. I'm not a huge hunter in terms, not like Bob and many of the folks who work for us. I was more a competition shooter. I'm more like the competition side of it. But for me, the competition side of it was what refined our ability to help that troop, to help that operator. And to me, so I was always super geeked out on the competition side because it just was the tightening of everything. And so that was my motivation. Now, Bob, that guy lives outside. He loves it. He loves living he lived in Oregon for a while. Now he's in Wyoming. He's absolutely thrilled. They have numerous guide services and training services, and he just loves being outside. He loves teaching guys how to shoot. It's something that he is excited about every day. And so the fact that he's involved in a situation where he owns companies that do these kinds of things, that just facilitates his passion. And so I bring all this up because, and that's not unique to just Bob and I. That's pretty common. I mean, it's pretty common, as you guys know. Yeah. Everywhere, for the most part, there's a few VC groups that are just all about the money. But the fact is, even the VC groups that I've been associated with have people within them that are geeked out about.
There's a reason they go after some of these companies. Yeah, absolutely.
They have all kinds of opportunities in every different direction, and they go after these companies because there's something there. And so it was that passion and that enthusiasm and all that. That's why we do it. And you talk about the families. At Defiance, it's so remarkable to me. I get frustrated. I like football. I happen to be a guy that does.
We're big football fans.
And
Michigan fan.
Okay, so I happen to like football. So when I go up there, I know the guys, I learned a while ago that there's only one guy up there that even watches football. Now, he happens to be a Steelers fan. I'm a Steelers fan.
Oh.
So the whole Rodgers thing, we won't even get into that. But so that's fun. But nobody else knows football because they're all out fishing and hunting and camping and, hiking. And that's what I hear. When I hear them talking to each other, they're talking about a great trail they were on.
Yeah.
And it's just the notion of having those kinds of people together, being that excited about what they're doing. Every one of them gets an action every year, and it's at an employee price, but they all build another gun, and they all are so excited about it. And they do that. And the idea of that not being around anymore, it just there was just every reason in the world to be as aggressive as we needed to be. And like I said, I would do it differently. Certainly, especially since I know how it turned out. That makes it easier. I would do it differently, but the fact is, you're right. We did. There were a lot of people who were affected by that move, and now the company is very healthy. The approach is very different. It doesn't have that same more reckless / aggressive kind of way of running, to where it was sort of always on the edge, always at risk. That was the reason why the owner who did own it, who could sell it, was tired of its performance. He is very passionate, very wealthy, very passionate outdoors person who's done a lot for that valley, was super excited about being in that world. But he wasn't the one that was pulling the levers and twisting the knobs. And he was just frustrated with the fact that it just didn't perform at all as a company. Yeah. And so by the time we got in, he was very happy for us to take it in the direction that it's going. And so now things have really improved. And then we just go from there.
Yeah.
So. One of the things that you mentioned, which I can totally relate to, and especially in this building, like everyone that works in this building is – in that same boat of so fueled by the passion. Now everyone's got to pay their bills, grow their career, and think big picture. But I think one thing that our generation and my generation for sure has become very aware of it, and maybe just myself, I don't know, but how rare it is to be able to make a living in the field that is your passion. Love what you do. Like my parents growing up, they cared about what they did, but I think because it was very much a means to an end, they didn't dream as a kid of being a computer programmer or X, Y, and Z. That wasn't what flipped their skirt up on the weekend, But for us and like all the folks that worked at Defiance that I got to meet, and the people at McMillan when I visited there, there's absolutely like that. They're rooted in the fact that they believe in the product, they believe in the lifestyle that it supports, and to be able to also make ends meet. And to grow your career in a field that you're passionate about, you feel so fortunate to be able to do that. That's I think the coolest thing about this industry. Like my father-in-law, Chris, he's worked his entire career in this industry. He started as a sales rep for Swarovski and Beretta and a lot of different firearm companies, like a long time ago. And I think back in those days, if you would ask him, and I could be wrong, I would think it was probably more of a means to an end. He did, it was a job, so a sales rep isn't the most glamorous, job in the world, even back then. But I think there was also that, like, there's those days when there's that grind, when you're squeezed, when it's really nice to be able to say, well, yeah, but I'm talking about guns. I'm close to the outdoors. I'm talking to men and women who like to do the same stuff I do. And it's maybe even hard to put to words, but it's comforting, and when I visited this past summer, the Defiance facility in Columbia Falls, that was very, very obvious. Like all the guys that I met that were running machines, Chad was great. He introduced me to everybody, kind of gave me the rundown of what their background, what their capacity was and responsibility was, but also told me just a little bit about them. And almost every single one of them was a hardcore hunter, shooter, whatever, and you could just tell, like that. Like obviously the level of skill and operative capability to run these machines and know that code, know that process of what they're doing is far above just a hobbyist. So it's really cool to see both a very, very sharp professional, but also a guy who's just, at the end of the day, he just, he's a hook and bullet type of dude too. that was super encouraging. And I felt the same thing at McMillan too. Varian was great. Like there was like this camaraderie amongst the whole team too. That was just, you can't replace that. And, it's been forever since I've walked into like a corporate building that sells paper or office supplies, but I would doubt I would feel that there.
It's just not.
I would doubt that would be there, and, I know you didn't get a chance to spend much time around our team this morning, and it's Monday. We usually have a little bit more of a get to work attitude on Mondays, but on any given minute when there's a lull or just kind of whatever, that's what guys are talking about.
Those guys are talking about hunting down there right now.
Absolutely.
If they're not both on the phone, I know that
Yeah.
a couple of them were out hunting last weekend. I guarantee there'll be multiple minutes, maybe too many minutes spent down there talking about hunting today. And that's what everybody, that's why they work here. That's why all of us work here. It's just
Well, most of us are going. We leave Thursday for a hunt. It'll be fun. We rarely get a chance to all hunt together, and so it's about 7 of us from the different teams. So Wilderness Athlete, Western Hunter, Outdoorsman's all going to take off for the same hunt, a Coos deer hunt in Southern Arizona here in a few days, which will be really fun. Just to be able to kind of put all of this, talk and knowledge and to the actual to play, in the field. So,
well, and I've seen that now. I've only worked. Over my career, I've only worked at Berger, then at McMillan, and I had a really brief stint with the Arizona Diamondbacks, but that's not worth worrying about. But my point is, I was in marketing actually. Yeah, center field.
Yeah.
The thing that's interesting about Defiance and McMillan is Defiance is in a valley that's very popular as a tourist destination, but it's only got about 100,000 people in the entire valley, and that's 3 different cities combined. It's about 100,000 people total. And the thing that I find very exciting, to your point, is so many people that work at Defiance started by reaching out to either the college gunsmithing school or there's a couple gunsmithing schools, and there was even a program. We have some employees that came from a program in Montana at a high school. I believe it's in Helena,
yeah.
That has a machinist kind of give you that background. Well, because the area doesn't have a lot of population, a number of the employees actually got involved in those schools, and that led them to Defiance. Defiance was one of the choices that they could have, and they aspired to come to Defiance. And
that's so cool.
Yeah, they took that path preemptively, and it's great that they made that journey, and we were able to connect with them, and we were able to give them that opportunity. So yeah, they're very much excited. Now here in Phoenix, McMillan, it's a little bit different. There's 4 million people in the
a lot of people
Maricopa County area.
A little bigger valley.
Right. There's, 15 different cities or whatever it is. And so the amount of people you have to choose from is a bit different. And we do get people that show up because they're interested in McMillan. That does happen. But a lot of folks, it's entry level. And the thing that they're trying to find a work, and we're putting ads out in the paper because we're looking for help. The thing that I find interesting is, like you said, some of the younger people, the thing that I've observed is their resumes have a lot of short stays on them. And so that makes me nervous. It made me nervous at first because I'm like, okay, they're not dependable. Well, there's so many of them were like that. What I came to understand, and in learning as I grow, to listen to younger people and what they have to say, is a lot of those people have that because they are looking.
Right.
They go somewhere and they don't think, well, I'm just going to stay here indefinitely because it's a paycheck. As soon as they decide that this isn't their calling, that they just bounce and they're all right, well, I'll just go find another entry level job. And the part that I take heart in is when those people get to McMillan and then they start working for McMillan, they stay around and they like, oh, this is interesting and this is great. And then they get keyed into it. And at McMillan, there's a little bit of a difference in the sense that at Defiance, it's a lot of machine operator, CNC, a lot of heavy equipment. At McMillan, it's a lot of sculpting. It's a lot of stuff done by hand. We do have CNC equipment that does all of our precision inlets, but laying down the stock, everything that's done beyond that is all handwork, and it's all it's a bit involved. So it's like art. It's really art-based. Once they get into that, then they're like, oh, okay. Not only do I get what we're doing, I'm sort of into it, and it's really cool. And so then you get to see that sort of purpose.
Yeah, when I was both with Varian and with Chad at different times. Like when Chad was giving me the background, especially like with their relationship with that high school in Helena and the program they support there, and the relationship they have with some of the gunsmithing schools. Like the first thing that came to mind was, I don't know if you've ever listened to Mike Rowe talk about, our skills gap in this country, and I've always taken a keen interest on that. Just I never came from the trades, and I took metals and wood shop when I was in high school, but for whatever reason, it was always very interesting to me. And I love seeing it's such a like encouraging feeling to see people gravitate to making products here in the U.S., learning the skill, the very like refined craft that it takes to run those machines. And in McMillan's case, it's almost even a step further because like I think that's one thing that we've lost as a society is just making things with your hands, and like we talk a lot kind of in a marketing sense, but just amongst ourselves and our teams here, we sense that there is a generational gravitating in return to being interested in things that are handmade, that are textile, that are hand goods, that are crafted, curated, that somebody put some creativity and energy and actual feeling into. And when I have held these stocks, I was shooting one this past weekend. There is just such a difference, and it's hard to even articulate what that difference is between that and maybe a stock that's more of just a mold off of a Bass Pro Shelf.
Tupperware, yeah.
Yeah, Tupperware,
sure.
exactly. So I think very used that word to me, and I'm like, that's it. It's Tupperware, And I can't. It's not like I can tell you, oh, well, it just feels different all these ways. There is just such a difference. Same thing with the actions. When you operate that bolt, from everything, the receiver moves and feels, everything just feels so damn comforting. And I don't know. I mean, obviously there's a lot of very fine mechanics to why that is, but I think one of the coolest parts is to see the way that both businesses have influenced the communities that they're in and have employed people on a micro level, in a local level, and have made products with their hands, for the hunting community and the shooting community. It's just gets me excited. Maybe I'm weird.
No, and I can relate to that. And so I'll make another observation, and this is a huge generalization. I'm not trying to pick on anybody, and I'm sure there's other ways of looking at this, but it's been my experience that there's basically three sort of different groups when it comes to companies in the firearms market. And they're all very passionate. I'm not taking away anything that I said before, but there's a group that they try to focus on being value or being economic, so they don't want things to be too expensive. So they try to make them simply, they try to make them for less cost. And I see the value in that, but there's no free lunch in physics. So, if you give something away, there's a tendency you are without that thing. You don't gain that somewhere else. And then, the other group that is somewhat more common than I expected, but it's remarkable how many people are in this group. There's a group of companies that are doing what they're doing because they have backers from very successful other companies that create these other smaller firearms companies because they're sort of niche and they're cool and all that kind of stuff. But they basically put those folks over there, and those folks don't really have any idea what they're doing. But they love firearms, and they know enough about it that it gives them something to do. And it's the only reason why I mention it is because it's remarkably more than you'd think. It's a little surprising how many people are actually like that. Well, those brands can be a little confusing because they seem like they're high value because they don't because they have a lot of the things that seem high value, but they're oddly priced. Like it's like, boy, these sure are savings. But then when you start actually breaking it down, and then you get to know them sort of behind the scenes, is well, they don't really know what they're doing, and so they try to win on value, and because they have this big money behind them, they don't really worry about how much money they lose, and so it just becomes one of these strange little brands that's like always sort of lingers, never really goes away, never really impresses anybody, but there's a few of those.
Sure.
And then you've got the folks that they really understand what they're doing. And so like one group that I refer to a lot is folks that got started in bench rest shooting. And the reason why I refer to bench rest shooters a lot is because bench rest shooters spend an excessive amount of time obsessing over a lot
Yes.
of things.
Yes.
And they do that just because they're compelled to. It's not the bench rest shooters aren't trying to one up anybody. They don't have a choice. They would be that way regardless.
Yeah.
And those people over time learn a lot about their craft.
Yeah.
And the thing that I just know to be true, and I learned more about this after the fact. I didn't know about this nearly as much up front. I did know that the person who founded Defiance was a bench rest shooter. And I knew that he was a successful bench rest shooter and had actually been involved in making several actions. The thing that I didn't quite know is I didn't understand how much goes into the making of an action when it comes to timing and tuning and when it comes to the ignition system. It's actually quite a lot. And so we've been doing a lot more research in that particular area. I say I've been looking at that particular area quite a lot because I want to be smarter about it. Because until I got involved in actions and stocks, everything I knew happened forward of the firing pin.
Yeah.
So I didn't, I didn't spend a lot of time worrying about actions and locking, clock on close and all this kind of stuff because it just wasn't relevant. I was twist rates, velocities, all that stuff. That was all my world. And so now I'm learning a lot more about how much actually went into the design and creation of the Defiance actions, because what he basically did is he put a bench rest action approach into a repeater. So from a timing and tuning, from a ignition control system, it's as close to out of the box with a Trigger Tech trigger and a Bix and Andy trigger as you can get. Now, there are some actions that use trigger hangers because you basically can adjust them. Now, those have their own challenges, but it allows you to adjust them. Ours don't use the adjustment because they also come with their own variabilities, which cause their own problems. So ours are set and established, but it is a truth that if you use a Trigger Tech trigger and a Bix and Andy trigger in a Defiance action, you're going to get as close to timed and tuned as you're going to get out of an action out of the box as you'll get anywhere. We've also learned there's actually only 2 other brands that can get that are that good at getting timed and tuned. And the other brands, they don't even actually have enough meat to be able to get you there. So you can only get a version of that. And I'm being vague on purpose because we've come to learn an interesting thing. First of all, is it's not easy to achieve. It comes from a balancing of things. So you can have 2 actions that are both timed and tuned that aren't geometrically precisely the same. Because if you take something away in one spot, as long as you put it back somewhere else, you can get that balance. So that it's not that you have to mimic an action precisely, but you do have to create the realities in the action to be able to get that kind of performance. And what that basically boils down to in practical terms is fewer flyers and tighter groups over a course of different representations, over different barrels, over different ammo, all that stuff. If your ignition system is really good, you get that consistent ignition, and that gives you the best possible chance of having fewer flyers and better precision performance.
It's funny you mentioned earlier how before your time at Defiance, all of your knowledge was ahead of and that's where I'm at, and honestly probably Brody and most guys.
Yeah, to me, really until about 5 minutes ago, I just thought an action was an action.
Yeah,
as long as it didn't break.
They feel different, right?
Yeah,
the way they look and it feels good, and but just learning what I've learned from you and Chad and the guys, there's so much more to it. We have some machinists in our team, and I asked them months ago, I was like, hey guys, what would it take to build an action? Just because I was realizing I had next to no knowledge about what is involved, and I was already kind of starting to scratch the surface at just what's involved in machining a part as no matter what it is, and it's very complicated. And the look they both gave me was like, oh God, just how, it's so complex.
Not right now.
To then try to refine that. So I'm kind of with you. I do want to actually start getting a much better grasp on what is involved and the importance in on the action. What's at the heart and soul of that rifle. And it's fascinating because like just as soon as you think you've understood a good amount about ballistics, rifling, barrels, ammunition, God, now you have everything behind it to to sink your teeth into.
Well, yeah, and that's where you're right, and I'm going through that same process now, because up until I got involved in actions, everything I knew about high quality actions was you just buy a Kelbley.
Mm-hmm.
Because those were all the bench rest actions were Kelbleys, and guys like Kelbleys. So that's all I needed to know was just get a Kelbley. Yeah. Well, the reality of it is there is a science to the performance. And the part that I got very frustrated with is on the bullet side, Berger's advantage, it has to do with balance around the axis. Now, I've gone into that at a couple other podcasts, and I won't waste a whole lot of time, but basically it's your jacket has to be very uniform down to measurements that are hard to even explain to people. Take a hair, cut it in 10 long pieces, and then cut one of those pieces into 10 more. I mean, that's the distances you're getting involved in. So it's hard to explain. It's hard for people to appreciate. But the fact is, that's a very real thing that you see on a target because it's dispersion. Yeah. And so if I take a product that is very even around the axis and another one that's not, I can show those to you on a target, and it's very simple to talk about. On actions, the thing that I was being told from my cursory exploration and all that was, well, you just got to make sure the guys that look good are shooting them. It's all cool guy stuff, right? It's all cool guy stuff. And I'm like, well, let me tell you, I'm not great in the cool guy world. I don't consider myself a cool guy. I like pretty much everybody equally, more or less.
The guys who are winning look pretty cool no matter what they.
But and that's the truth. And the thing that I struggle with is that's not logical. That's not that to me wasn't tangible. I couldn't hang my hat on that. I needed something specific. I needed something concrete. And so, I just started asking questions and I started exploring, and then we end up getting exposed to a particular gun builder who we're going to be talking a lot more about as time goes on, as we get more of this stuff resolved, that started talking to me about timing and tuning. Well, it was interesting because up until that moment, it was an idea almost entirely foreign to me. I hadn't even really heard the words. If I did, I didn't really understand it. It's like one of those deals. I don't know if you guys ever bought a new car, and the next thing you know, you see that car everywhere. Everybody else all of a sudden has that car.
Yeah.
Well, as soon as I started understanding what timing and tuning meant, and I started talking about it as a real thing, oh my gosh, now, you know about timing and tuning? Oh, yeah. Oh, you guys know about, oh, yeah. Well, this out, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is a thing. And there are people who pay a lot of attention to it. And usually the people who pay an incredible amount of attention to it are on your very high-end competition world. High-end F-class guys, bench rest folks, almost every bench rest folk.
Yeah.
Some of the more competitive PRS folks that are really hardcore into the precision part of it. Those folks, that's a normal part of their conversation. So it's like, okay, well, this is real. This isn't just something somebody came up with and it's just this fake thing. This is like a real thing. And then we started getting into it. Well, this one particular gun builder has broken it down to a science where he has stuff that he actually measures and then the results that he gets. And he's been reviewing this now for several years. And we're very excited with all that. And we've been working very closely with him so we can further define it and primarily so we can better explain it.
Right.
So there's so much more. I used to always think, the thing when I was at gun shows and I'd see somebody come up and they'd grab one of the actions and they'd open it up and they'd slide it back and forth. They're, oh, well, that's smooth. To me, that was the beginning and the end of the conversation. Either they like that smoothness and we got them action sold, or they didn't.
Yeah.
Now I understand that's not even that the smoothness is the result of a whole nother mechanism.
Yeah.
That's actually serving a very different and more important purpose. It just, if it's done well, it will also happen to be smooth.
Okay.
And so the part that they're observing as the smoothness that I always took as, well, this must be a measure of merit that's significant, actually is a residual of these other efforts
downstream from the performance side.
Exactly.
Okay. That's interesting. That makes sense. I mean, there's so much, inside internally that you
Mm-hmm.
can't see and witness and or interact with, right? But like the operation, the smoothness, that's everyone can understand and feel that. That's
Well, and when a firearm goes off, the violent energy. I mean, you're talking 50 to now 80,000 psi, depending on if you got a backcountry or a standard round.
right.
50 to 80,000 psi, all in milliseconds. It's a tremendous amount of energy being harnessed in an extraordinarily short period of time, and for us to think that there's an intuitive, like, I can just think my way through what happens into that process. I failed. It's just what I learned the hard way, that it's not that's not real. But what is real is there is something actually there going on. And we're just, I just happened to be lucky enough that we ended up with a brand that already had it before I learned more about it.
Yeah.
And so that part's really been cool. That's been sort of a rebirth for me.
Well, let's take a look at what you got here, because I think one of the things that anyone who's ever spent some time on the Defiance website or the McMillan website can recognize is there's a lot of options.
Right.
A lot of options, a lot of different specialties. Obviously, there's some lanes you need to be in depending on caliber and what type of weight you're going for, but there's way more to that whole equation. So why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction to what we're looking at here?
Well, so yes, one of the things that is a truth that I used to think was a big positive is that both Defiance and McMillan have a ton of options. And so we had marketing programs talking about how many options and how great that was. And we even had stuff on our web store that showed all these options. And the thing that we learned the hard way is that eyes just glaze over. People get buying confusion. They don't understand which option is better for me and all that kind of stuff. So we're getting away from that. So what we're focusing more on is the options will always be there because we didn't lose our ability to make stuff. But what we are focusing more on when it comes to the actions, there's basically 5 categories within the standard actions, and then there's some specialty actions. And the 5 categories are simply an ultralight hunter. So this is going to be your titanium actions. We've got 2. We've got one with an integral rail and one without. Now the titanium actions, those are for the guys that cut their toothbrushes in half, that want to shave every ounce that they possibly can, and that aren't going to shoot necessarily hundreds of rounds throughout like a competition season or some heavy hunting, heavy sighting in, heavy testing. It's really better for a moderate to light use, ultralight rig. But then you've got your steel ultralight hunter actions. Now these are the lightest steel actions that you can get for hunting, but the cool thing about them is they're heavy usage. Okay. Steel responds a lot better to heavy usage than titanium. Yeah. So these steel actions, now they're both identical in terms of how they look. Just the material makes the ultralight one lighter.
Could I just feel the difference between the two?
Yeah.
I know there's probably
you'll feel it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's the anti and the anti-X.
Well, so the anti-X, they're both made in the same configuration as the anti-X. We just call one the anti-X. And the other one is called simply the TIX. The TIX.
Yeah. I got you.
And actually the anti-X, it's spelt lowercase a, lowercase n, capital T, and then lowercase I.
Gotcha.
Because it was meant to be, the anti-X was meant to be the action that replaced your need for titanium.
Oh, I see.
And so this was the steel version of what was meant to replace titanium. Yeah, so you didn't need titanium because this steel action was so light. Well, so the original manager, the original leader of the company, didn't want to make actions out of titanium. It's harder, it's slower. There are complications. Like I said, the not so heavy usage versus heavy usage. There are reasons why it's not an ideal material. And so those were all valid. But when we realized that he had designed the lightest steel action that can be made, well, if we just simply replace the receiver material, well, now we've got the lightest action in existence. And so it just made sense to do it. And so it's for a particular group, the ultra lightweight crowd that doesn't have high activity. But this anti-X, if you're looking for a last forever lightest steel action you can get. That's the
it's
category
like the
here.
hunting action that you can go, use as a trainer and use use hunting. Where
Absolutely.
the titanium version, maybe not, putting 10,000 rounds a year through it that's not what it's made for.
It'll do it.
It'll
just, you'll find the experience is not as enjoyable.
Yeah.
There is a gumminess to it. There are some things. Now we cover it in DLC. We put the bolt is nitrided, and it's aluminum. It's not, or excuse me, not aluminum. It's the chromoly steel. So they're not that same material, so they don't gall or they won't gall as badly. But yeah, so that's a specialty kind of thing. Then you've got your light hunting action. Then you have what we call our medium hunting action. And so this hunting action would be for those who maybe want to use some bigger cartridges. If you're an NRL hunter competitor and you want a cross, you want a rifle that both hunts and competes, this slightly heavier action can get you there. Now this anti-X can do really well in competition as well, but this just gives you a bit more rigidity, a little bit heavier, just makes it a little bit more robust system for the hunters. So
is that a ruckus, or would that be called a ruckus, or is that a different delineation between the models?
Yeah, no, this one is a ruckus.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that is a little bit confusing about the Defiance is that we have a few different models. There's like 6, but the ruckus comes in so many different configurations, and the Deviant comes in so many different configurations that we actually make a ruckus in essentially everything.
Okay.
Because this, even though these are called anti-X's, it's basically just a ruckus with more material removed.
Now what like determines that it's a ruckus? Like what is the ruckus like?
Well, so the main difference between those core systems, the ruckus and the Deviant, is the handle.
Okay.
So a ruckus handle, the end of the handle is right at the end of the bolt, or right at the edge of the bolt. So this bolt, it's all one piece, other than the fire control system. It's all one piece, but the threads stop right where the bolt portion comes out of the main bolt, or the threads come out of the main bolt. So on a ruckus, you'll have the handle, and then you'll have the rod that extends from the actual ball to where it screws into the action.
Okay.
Now, it was the second version. The Deviant was the first version. And the reason, so its difference is the handle it's all one piece, but the handle comes all the way out to where the ball is.
Okay.
So hypothetically, if your ball were to unscrew and fall off somewhere, you'd still have a handle to grab.
Sure.
Now, the challenge with that is back then, when they were originally made, you couldn't hold the tolerance as tight as you can today. Like now we can do guaranteed headspace even on the Deviant. But so they made the ruckus because they were able to, because the way the bolt's made, they were able to hold the bolt dimensions so that you could have the prefits.
Okay.
Gotcha.
And so that's why all the Defiance prefit barrels are called ruckus prefits.
Gotcha.
Because it was the ruckus that they did it on. It just so happens that ruckus prefit fits everything but a Deviant.
Yeah.
So it fits an anti-X. It fits an out. It fits all
it's
these
not
other.
just for the ruckus.
I've been looking at proof prefits for these, and it's like, and now that you explain it, it makes a lot more sense. I was like, okay, well, if I get the one for the Deviant, then that's not going to work at all. So you have to just make sure you have the right one, but then it's going to fit all of the ruckuses.
Well, I will announce something here. This is the first time this has been announced. This is a one of those world exclusives.
Cool.
We are coming out with a Deviant that is going to be guaranteed headspace. So in the future, and it actually will fit the ruckus. So the ruckus dimensions for a ruckus prefit for a ruckus action
will work on
a Deviant.
Wow.
Actually, it's as it is now. They do now. The reason why we haven't made that a public thing yet is because there was nervousness about the fact that they won't fit all Deviants. See, right now all the ruckuses were made the same way. So any ruckus you have will have that same thing. Well, now we had to have a robust system in place to be able to let folks know, okay, well, if you're Deviant, if you give us your serial number, we can tell you whether your Deviant was made during the time when we were keeping track of that that are not.
Gotcha.
And so then
Gotcha.
then it will be clear which deviants will fit the ruckus prefits. So yeah, so they will actually have that.
That's
coming
really
forward.
nice. Yeah, that's awesome.
And that'll even be with the handle.
Oh,
So
okay.
so we've learned time is has evolved and we've
Machining is
gotten better at
and-
machining.
Yep.
We've learned how to make that full blown deviant handle, that deviant bolt, and maintain the tight headspace because it's total of 1,000, so it's less. It's pretty tight tolerance
Yeah,
that's
to
for
hold, and we can do that now. So
Let me ask a question. So I know with outdoorsmen's, we've got similar to you guys. I would argue we probably have more SKUs. Maybe we don't. I don't know. Just so many different adapters,
We have a lot
plates,
of little SKUs. Yeah.
little SKUs, just so many different things that goes into your tripod, your optics mounting system, whatever type of accessories you want. So customer service for us is a huge pillar in how we do business. We always encourage people to call us, understand what they're trying to accomplish, how they hunt, how they're glassing, like what their setup is to, really prescribe the right setup for them so they don't kind of fumble through the website, order the wrong thing, and have a poor experience. How big is that for you guys? Do you have, is that something that you guys have prioritized, like encouraging folks to, because to us, we're I think fairly familiar with all these components, and even us, we're still trying to wrap our head around it. But I know there's so many people that they hunt once, twice a year. They shoot maybe once, twice a year, but they do want the best. They do appreciate good equipment. They've got the resources to pay for it, but they may find themselves a bit overwhelmed or out of water and kind of getting the right setup for them. So
yeah,
how big is that component of the business? The customer service side of it.
it's huge. Matter of fact, it's daunting. And so what I was saying earlier was part of our evolution and part of our struggle is the fact that I thought that because we had so many options, we were going to be the answer to that, right? So, okay, yeah, whatever you want, we've got it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but as you all have learned, the people who hunt, the audience, the customers are a mix. Some of them have a pretty clear idea what they want, even if it's not what's best for them, or whatever.
Right.
Some of them have a pretty clear idea. Some of them, they're not exactly sure, but they've heard a few things. And then others are so nervous about getting the wrong thing because they feel it's gonna be the thing that causes them to have a bad experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a very difficult thing to do because, one thing I can share with you that we went through at McMillan a whole lot more than we did over at Defiance was, McMillan has lifetime guarantee on all of its stocks because of the way that they're made. Well, so we've got molds for the last 53 years. And so those we've got hundreds of molds because
I saw some of those.
Yeah. Oh, there's a whole rack of molds stored outside because there's so many of them.
Yeah.
Well, because if somebody got a stock 40 years ago and for some reason it doesn't work, well, we've promised that we're going to replace that. Well, now, so what I was getting to is when I was back at Burger, I learned to appreciate obsoleting things that aren't popular. Yeah, aren't popular because it gets rid of that confusion. It distracts people less. Mm-hmm. And so we started doing that at McMillan, thinking, well, these are stocks that we sold maybe one every 2 years. They weren't significant volume, and we'll just clear them out of the way so that these people have a better pool to choose from. It's not quite so confusing. Oh my gosh, you'd have thought we'd have let somebody's, beloved dog out in the street somewhere. Yeah. It's just like, oh, you can't discontinue that. That's the this and the that. Yeah. It's really tough because it seems as though you equally affect those people that seem to want to make every choice and to consider every choice. It's almost like they enjoy making of choices, as much as the choice
getting
itself.
Into the weeds,
just
absolutely
exploring and all this kind
That's
of
part of it.
Yeah, and in some ways it is, but boy, it sure does create a lot of.
There's plenty of things you can do that with that aren't this.
I can tell you on McMillan, this is something we're actually addressing right now. On a McMillan order process, McMillan stocks are tailored in the sense that we the ports, the bolt stops, the notches, everything is tailored to a specific action. So if somebody knows what they have, it's very easy for us to give them what they want. The challenge we run into is when somebody doesn't know what they have, or they think they know, and they say it, and then we make it, and then they go to put it in, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so that creates this frustration of, well, there's 17 different points that we have to address on every stock. Now, there's a lot of stuff that you can just assume. There's a lot of stuff, okay, we've got this, then that takes care of 8 of those. That just sort of settles it. But when you have that many options, you do get the blend of some people who appreciate having those choices, and then you get the others that are like, I'm just going to throw my hands up and I'll go order something else just because I can't make heads or tails of it.
Yeah.
And so we're addressing that also by McMillan. In the future, you're going to see more representation of like completed spec builds, because like these are the most popular variants of this particular stock.
For a lot of folks.
We're in podcasts like this, and in our marketing, we're going to talk about the 4 or 5 stocks that account for 80% of all of our sales.
Yeah.
It's the more modern hunting stocks, a couple of the more recent, heavy favorites that represents the vast majority. And so those that really want to get into the weeds and make those choices, we have that experience choice too.
Yeah.
But when it really boils down to it, there's basically 5 stocks that pretty much everybody's getting.
The other component too that I learned when I was at the Defiance facility, like looking at a lot of the orders that were coming through, is like, it feels like correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like the vast majority of the business, at least from the Defiance side, is to gun builders, gunsmiths. Mm-hmm. So it's not like your biggest channel is direct to consumer, where the vast majority of your orders are customers that need to kind of navigate that process on their own. And it's awesome because obviously the gunsmith, the gun builder community, like that's an industry, that's a niche that it needs to be, supported as well. So, for people listening, or for, I guess, just anybody, like if you're looking to build a rifle around some of these components, it might be, it's probably your best bet to start with the gunsmith that you're already going to work with, that you might already know, you have some experience with, because they may be able to kind of steer you in the direction of the whole build. Not that you guys aren't able to do that, but that's it seems like that's kind of the customer that you've already built a really great relationship with, is the almost like they're almost like sales reps in a way, like the experts in the field that are putting your different actions, your different stocks into the builds that their customers are wanting, right? So
so the vast, these are products that aren't ready to go out of the box, as it were. You when you buy an action, you need a barrel, you need a trigger, you need them chambered. There's stuff that needs done, and certainly going to a builder, a known builder, or a builder that and asking them questions is an important thing. I would recommend to anybody, another group that's also very significant, certainly for Defiance, is what we refer to as our resellers. And what I mean by that is, you're like Red Hawk. There's some outfits out there that they inventory a lot of components that builders use. And the builders, because they, instead of going, well, I'll call Defiance today and I'll call McMillan tomorrow and I'll call, the next day, they go to these single places that have it all combined. And those places serve as great places to get information from, because they end up dealing with a number of different products. Yeah. So the one thing that I would caution any shooter is, I would suggest always that you ask questions, certainly ask questions. I would recommend asking questions from a few different sources. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I say that is because everybody has different perspective. Everybody has different experiences. And there are some people who have had experiences that may not necessarily reflect the brand as well as it could. Mm-hmm. And so I would check a few things. And the favorite question I ever ask is one that I already think I know the answer to. Yeah. And so if somebody tells you, oh, well, if this is the best action you'll ever get, okay, take that information and go ask somebody else just to see what they'll say. Yeah. I think it'll surprise people how many times the answer could be modified to some extent. Totally. And if you think critically about why they're saying what they're saying, it's more likely that you'll get down to what's important to you, because that's
Sure.
ultimately it's
Yeah.
whatever is most important to you. And some products have things that they emphasize that aren't important. And so you want to, I would recommend asking multiple
That's a great
people.
point.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah, they're
I'm-
a huge part of it.
I'm definitely the type of guy that, I like for instance, I really want to like basically take all the parts and build my own rifle. I want to be able to screw a barrel on myself and things like that. And then with talking with certain people, they're like, "That's great if you want to do that just for something to do, something for us. We make content here. That's something we can make content out of. But if you want to make a really accurate rifle, there's guys that have been doing it for multiple years that they can do that and then almost warranty it too. They're like, you can get all the parts, but they know, well, if you buy this trigger and this action, that might not be the best, and you got this different barrel. It's good to go to somebody who like knows what they're doing, especially if you talk to two people who know what they're doing, then you kind of do a blend of the two, or you can get basically a better setup.
And I would caution those who are looking for a builder to ask two important questions. One would be to ask them how long they've been doing it, because if they've been doing it for a little while, chances are they've settled in and they've really got a good thing going on. Because if those who are in their first couple of years are learning a lot.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I would ask them is do they have any references? And I would say that because it's remarkably transient, the builder community, and it's more so than I expected. We always dealt with end consumers in the bullet world primarily because that's who's using your product. In the builder community, there's a lot of folks that just like guns. They like building guns. They build a few of their own. They're like, oh no, I'll do this, and I'll handle it. And so they tell a few folks. The next thing you know, they're a gun builder, and many of those folks do well, but some of them struggle a little bit. So I would caution anybody to find out how long that person's been building guns and ask them if they have a few customers that they could reference them to. Because if they do, if they've got a bunch of customers, then they could easily give you a name. It's no problem.
Yeah.
But if they're like, well, I don't know, they're all busy. Well, okay.
Yeah.
I think
sometimes people tell you who they are, pretty quickly. So
one of the merits, like, cause going back to what you were mentioning about the bench rest community and like the importance of like the knowledge base that sport, bench rest shooting, has built and how that translates to the hunting side of things. I'll throw a hat in the ring there for the value of going to matches and getting involved in that. Like for example, I just started doing that last year, doing the NRL Hunter Series for the first year, and I met some people and I watched some people shoot really, really well, and I paid attention to what equipment they were using, and so I actually built some personal relationships with people, and watched how well they were shooting, watched the equipment they were using, and then that kind of formed a certain amount of confidence in my mind of like what components are really working well and who's putting them together that knows what they're doing too. Because it's really hard to argue with firsthand experience. Really hard to argue with that. I mean, Buck Saris is the one. He has a company, Remuda Rifles, out of Sonoma, California. He pieced together mine, so it's a Ruckus GA Action, the ELR Hunter stock, and we use just a proof prefit barrel. He's working on another one that'll be that one I'll use for the NRL series this next year, and I think that's what he's really excited about. He loves, actually doing the barrel side of things too. That's his excitement. Mm-hmm. He's got a new lathe that he's working to get set up right now. But to me, just like with so many things in this community, is so much of it is about the people too, like that you build a relationship with and you trust. And he's an incredible shooter himself. He's built some incredible rifles for some other very talented shooters. So, I get a whole lot of confidence in that. And so I would just urge other people too, like if this is something that you're interested in getting into, like if you're into this high level of elite equipment, go out and test it, man. Like, go out and get involved in like an NRL Hunter shoot or a PRS shoot. You'll really, I think, be glad you did. I was just floored at the amount of information that I was surrounded by and equipment that I was seeing, introduced to. So I feel like that took me from, I'm not going to say 0 to 100, but 0 to 60 a lot quicker than I otherwise would have just by reading forums. You can learn a lot that way, but there's that critical piece missing when you're sitting behind a computer, which is what's the real world experience? How does a guy talk to you about what he does? Where's just that one-on-one interaction means a whole lot too.
Well, and personally, I'm very excited by the NRL hunting primarily, PRS to some degree also, because back when I was involved in bench rest and F class, those are competitions that don't exist in nature.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have covered cabanas and and 3-inch forestocks, and they just don't exist in nature. So now there is a lot that translates to shooting, but not a lot that translates to practical engagement. But as far as precision and all that kind of stuff, and the fact that NRL hunting is much more practical in its application, it's a great place for people that don't have a lot of experience to go because it's so concentrated. You'll get 100, 160, depending, sometimes 200 people all there, all doing basically the same thing, all being excited about shooting. And the thing, if you haven't experienced a shooting competition, I would encourage you to do so. And I think the thing that will surprise a lot of people is how kind everybody is and how much people want to engage in what they're talking about. These folks aren't taking home 6-figure checks when they win.
No checks.
They're doing nothing. They're doing it. Yeah, exactly. They're doing it out of the pure enjoyment they get out of doing the activity. And folks like that, when you're standing next to them and you say, well, why is this like this? Boy, they're a wealth of information, just like you said.
Yeah.
And, take everything with a grain of salt because everybody's got their own approaches, but you won't have, it certainly won't be from a lack of input.
No, yeah.
It's very
I was
good.
really surprised by that in a great way. It was, it's intimidating to get into a competitive field of any nature. I've been shooting guns my whole life, but I've never gone into a rifle match. And so it was like, whoa, this is going to be something totally new. You see a lot of guys that are, they got logos all over their shirts. Like they know what they're doing. They're hot. Everybody knows who they are. You're like, God, that guy must be somebody. But the cool part was that just about everybody is like it's very humbling. It's a very hard thing. So like everyone's there to support and teach people. And it's a very addicting thing. And I don't think there's any way to get better at just becoming a more proficient rifleman than getting into some form of competitive shooting rather than just going to your local range and setting up that 100-yard to 500-yard target. Like that's good and well, but there's a lot more to that whole game.
Well, there are certainly ways that people can enhance their skills without being in a competition. But one of the things that competitions do is they put you under a manufactured pressure.
Yeah.
Whereas shooting, I remember this distinctly from bench rest, practicing bench rest when there is no match. I don't know how many 1s and 0s I've shot because there's no pressure. You're just sitting there very calmly taking your time. Your heart's not racing, none of that. As soon as you put a clock on and there's, shoulder to shoulder with a bunch of other folks, now all of a sudden there's pressure. And by the time you get 3 shots that group together really well, boy, your heart starts racing a little bit. And,
doing it.
And your mouth starts getting dry. It starts coming. So that the competition does provide that measure of pressure that makes you sort of focus your thoughts. And I would say it's very good. Now, I very much like NRL competition because it is so practical. If you've hunted at all and you've glassed and you've ranged, you know how to NRL shoot. Yeah. Now you might have to go to a stage and learn what order I go in the targets, all that kind of stuff, but it's glassing, it's ranging, and it's pulling triggers. And if you've done that ever, then you'll be successful in it because you can take that same rifle you took to an NRL event. The PRS, like bench rest, is very specialized. F class is highly specialized. PRS is practical in how it's applied, but they're 22, 25-pound rifles. Yeah. They're highly specialized in terms of each event. They have different configurations they use, with the thumb thing and all that kind of stuff. So it's practical shooting, but it's practical shooting with a specialized twist. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it's still good shooting. It's still a good way to learn. But NRL shooting is, if you're worried about being a competitive shooter and you've ever hunted, I would take a look at NRL hunting because NRL shooting NRL hunter shooting because it's almost like doing the same thing.
Yeah, the 4 or 5 that I competed in this year, everyone that I was squatted with were hardcore hunters.
Yeah.
They're all there to become better riflemen. Everyone's competitive. They want to win a match, but mostly they're just they're talking about the tags they got, the hunts they got. They want to be better in the field when it counts. The other thing I'd throw out there is that you got to be good at, and what I've definitely struggled the most with is building a position. And that does translate. It's probably the most critical thing I think that translates to a hunt is, you can find the animal, the range, and you feel good about being able to shoot it. But if you're on a crazy downhill slope, you've got a tree in the way, you've got uphill, you've got all sorts of topography in your way that are making it not convenient. You've got to feel comfortable and familiar with, how do I build this stable shooting position in that situation quickly to execute that shot. And that's I think one of the things that I struggled with the most, and I think probably presents the biggest obstacle for people. Like, almost everybody feels good getting prone. It's different when you've got to get, a rear tripod support. You've got to be really raked in the front, or, there's a lot of different variations that you've got to contend with. But why don't you show us the stocks real quick too? There's
So the couple things to know about the stocks is the models that are the more modern models that people are getting excited about here recently. The one that's most popular is the ELR Hunter, and this one's actually being used quite a bit in the NRL Hunter series and some others. It incorporates an adjustable cheek piece, but it's got some, it incorporated the Picatinny rail and the Arca rail. This is the result of a lot of what customers are asking for in the more modern style. And it has this area up in the front, keep it a little lighter, keep it a little stiffer. Then another new one that we have is basically a hybrid of a tactical. It's the A35, and this stock is one of our most popular tactical stocks, to the extent that guys were ordering it with. So the way McMillan does it, everything we do by hand. We mix all of our epoxies by hand, all of our mixtures by hand. And when we do the tactical stocks, we use mixtures that are heavier and stronger, because they're usually shooting stuff that's harder recoil, higher velocity. Well, so a lot of guys that had been familiar with the A35, they're like, hey, this is great, but I'd love a lighter one for a hunting rig and build one of those. Right. So now we've come out with the A35 Hunter.
Was the A35, was that the stock that Chris Kyle
No.
had used? Which one was that?
That was the A5.
A5.
Yeah, okay. That was the A5. Okay. So the A35 takes the 5 is this part, is the rear.
Okay.
So this is the same. This configuration is the same as an A5.
Okay.
The A3 has a bit of a different. The A5 is more straight.
Right.
It's more like an A4. It's more of a solid, same size all the way down. It gets more slender and it gets a little bit lighter. It's meant to be more of a lighter tactical stock, but it's really been very popular with folks for a hunting stock, and folks asked for it. So we went ahead.
One thing I was curious, I've never tried before, and when I was looking at these with Varian, this notch, this cutout here, my thought initially, why I moved away from this option, was that it might make that bag position, while it's designed to help you, get lower on it, it might make it a little bit more challenging for me when I'm trying to get that buttstock higher. But I did find myself yesterday, I guess it was yesterday shooting, where that would have been actually really nice.
Okay.
So I've just never used it.
Shooting more uphill.
Yep. The range we got where our steel's at, most of our targets are kind of like that. So being able to really nestle that rear rest in there well. One of these days I'll find someone with one of these in a rifle. I'd love to try that just to see how it feels, because the look of it's great.
Well, and it's funny that you say that, because I've always been familiar with stocks that had just a standard butt, just a standard toe. And when I first saw these stocks, I asked about them. I'm like, that, because to me, I like the idea of having room to have for a rifle to recoil through a bag. Because the notion that it might come off and that might throw a shot, the bullet's not in the barrel very long, so I don't know how realistic that is. But that's what was in my head. Well, what I was told is that this is a function of pushing it into your shoulder.
Oh,
that's what this is for. It's a butt hook meant to take the stock and actually jam it into your shoulder
Interesting.
Okay.
so that you have a stronger position for tactical kind of shooting. So that this is actually referred to as a butt hook.
Okay.
And it's meant as they're getting on it to actually push it back into the shoulder. That's what it's for.
I could benefit from that because I think that's something I notice I struggle with a lot is like between like a string of shots, that butt stock tends to just kind of float there. Whereas usually when that first shot, I've got it nestled in right where I need it, not too hard, but like making sure you have that consistent, repeatable pressure. That would be nice.
Well, and so there is no question at all that when it comes to variety and variability and personal preference, nothing is more complicated than a stock.
Yeah.
Because the actions, there's some purpose driving design. But when it comes to this, there's so many preferences.
Right.
There's body configuration. There's arm length. There's hand size. There's
neck length.
Yeah.
The structure
Some
of your
guys,
face is so much different.
So there's new, and there's techniques that are coming up now where, so there's, there was the idea of keeping it in the pocket of your shoulder. Now there's the idea of basically keeping it just off the breastplate.
Yep.
So that it stays on target so you don't lose target.
Yep.
But then at the same time, they don't want to tilt their heads. So they're coming in, they're actually taking these out.
Yep.
And they're not having any cheek weld.
Yeah.
And so there's all these techniques are sort of entering into shooting, which then affects, the kind of designs that we have.
Right.
And, some guys love the thumb shelf. Some guys don't want the thumb shelf. This particular part right here is incredibly controversial.
I can't stand that.
Because, yes,
what is it for?
It's meant to position your hand so that you're not cocked.
Sure.
So,
okay.
like, if you look here,
at a more like traditional stock.
The more traditional swept stock, one of the things that can happen is your hand can feel cocked, and so folks will talk about how that strains the comfort of the shooting, and so the notion was we'll put in this trigger stop, so then your hand is basically forced into an upright position.
You're doing
idea.
that for a Browning stock right now because I think
it's available both ways on a number of models.
Okay.
Yeah, you can get a number of models both with it and without it.
We were at SHOT Show last year, and it was a squad of like 4 or 5 of us, and we pulled one of these Browning rifles off the shelf that had that, and we were almost split of like I like it or I hate it,
And that's what happens. Some people
have different size hands.
Yeah.
Some people have different length fingers.
Yep.
Well, and Kelly had very large hands. And there was a guy there that we called Thunder Grip. This guy's name was Josh. And he had very large hands. And so a lot of the McMillan stocks are notorious for having very big palm areas.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
But that's just because when he threw his big, hands on there, that's what felt comfortable. And so that's what was made. And the guy, actually the R&D guy, also had big hands. And so McMillan's tended to run beefy. Well, so another thing that's come up is the distance from the grip to the actual trigger.
Yep.
That's another thing that's becoming more scientific in the sense that we're resolving to a particular number.
Yeah.
Because the request, we get the request for both, but we're getting requests for more that have shorter distances. This upright shooting, the industry standard on length of pull is 13.5 inches. That's everybody. That's not McMillan or any even custom. That's the whole industry. Well, with this more upright, in the center of chest shooting style, length of pulls are now starting to get into the 12s and the 12 and a halves because you don't have that. You're not knifing your body away and giving yourself more distance. You're making it shorter.
Yep.
And so we actually have some stocks that are they're becoming very popular that were actually originally designed for more like a youth or a smaller person, but that's not, people are liking them because they have the shorter throw and they fit better in the new style or in these more straight up, straight away starting shooting styles. So
I always wanted something with an adjustable cheek piece. So, you can move it up and down, but I've actually over the last year kind of transitioned the way I shoot from, a more traditional knife style to that, just shooting my butt just off that breastplate and having my head in a more upright position. And now I've actually, on one of my chassis, I move it all the way down to the bottom because my head is so much more upright. I don't really need anything.
Do you not
here.
touch it at all now?
I touch it a little
Okay,
bit. I touch it a little bit, something like on my chin though, like the lower part of my chin. I'm not rested, in
not like the hard
sense.
weld. Yeah,
exactly.
And to keep up with all that, it makes it challenging. It makes it challenging.
Yeah.
So when it comes to stocks, what we're talking about more these days here are the 4 or 5 models that make up 80%. And their vast majority of them are hunting with the A5. There are some tactical stocks that are sort of true blue. Those do pretty well all the time. A lot of them are the clone stocks, for the M40A1 and all those kinds of stocks, and the HTGs and such. Those are always really popular. But the thing, if there's a single message that I would want for people to understand about McMillan stocks compared to other stocks, the thing that I've come to understand that to me is significant, and it's a true performance thing, is how they're made. All of the stocks across the board are made in the same way that we made the stocks that went into combat. They're all, it's a single shell construction. And that's important because a lot of the stocks that are made these days, and I won't pick on anybody, but they're trying to go for simpler, they're trying to go for less expensive, and they use processes like one of them is called pre-preg. So the cloth material comes with the epoxy already on it. It's a material it's just ready to go, and then you put it in position in the mold, and then you put it in an oven, and the pre-impregnated epoxy eventually just melts and it comes together, and that's what fuses it. Well, we're aware of the fact that, like there's no free lunch in physics. When you have two things that aren't one piece when they start, there are strength issues. There are challenges related to that. Well, all McMillan stocks are done in a wet process. So everything, it comes and is laid into the mold as one solid shell. Now it is two pieces, but what we have is we have overlap pieces that wet material comes together and overlaps, and then we have a bladder that goes in and fills that whole thing up. So all of the entire shell all the way around ends up being one solid continuous piece that is all completely wet. I mean, it's the material's in a cup when you bring it to the bench to do it.
Yeah.
And then that gets cured up overnight. And so when that cures up and becomes solid, it's literally one solid piece all the way around. And then when we make our fills today that are available, that are lower cost and higher speed, are injectable. And so they have to flow through applicator. Well, McMillan found out a long time ago, and by McMillan, I mean Gail McMillan, the guy who actually started the whole company, found out a long time ago that he could control the strength and the weight of stocks by basically tuning the formula to have specific characteristics. So we use fiber pieces, actual fiber pieces of different sizes. We use different kind of their little air bubbles. Not air bubbles like you wouldn't see it. They're so small, but it's blended in with the other epoxies. It changes weight. It changes density.
Wow.
Well, we put different densities into different spots. Like this particular action, like this portion might be something different than what's right here versus what's right there versus what's in the back. Well, all that's done for a reason. And it's all one continuous piece. So then when all of that gets put in there, it's all put in by hand. Wow. So we mix all that by hand, and then we lay it all by hand so that we can put it right where it's supposed to go. And so then when everything does cure up, it's all one continuous solid piece because we use the epoxy on the inside for all of that to fuse together. And the difference in what that makes in terms of vibration deadening, the difference in what that makes in terms of strength, McMillan stocks, they have the only stocks that have a guaranteed lifetime guarantee. We had one, actually had a couple, but this one particular story, officer had his rifle in the rear end of his car and he got rear-ended, in the trunk of his car and he got rear-ended, and the car started on fire. And so he called us and he said, "Hey, I've got one of your stocks. It got burned in a fire. Will you guys cover it?" And we get so few, and we're like, "Sure, absolutely."
Sure, yeah.
So we replaced the stock that got burned in a fire. So my point being, there is a genuine difference, and so we've got battle proven design, battle proven manufacturing techniques that are being used to make hunting stocks.
Yep.
That are going out in the field, and they're that way for a reason. And so we're working to get everybody to understand it more simply, so they're not as scared of it and they're not as nervous about it. And then we help them understand what they're looking for, and then when they get it and they actually use it, they're typically very happy.
Yeah.
So, let's take a quick break. You mentioned the process of all of the handmade components, the different densities, the fill. That takes time, right? Like anything good takes time. But that's probably also got to be why you can't just order a stock and have it on your porch next day air like Amazon Prime has taught our community. But and to me, I think that's something that I think is we probably need to retrain ourselves with, is understanding that some things take time and they're not just like ready to order, ready to deliver.
Yeah.
What's the average wait time, lead time for some of these models? And is that a focus, or is the streamlining of efficiency, is that like, where's that going? What's the timeline that customers could expect now?
Well, so we've got a couple different realities. So there's the stocks that we make that are painted, that you make the stock and then you spray paint on the outside. Those are running about 2 or 3 months. Those don't take an exorbitant amount of time. Now, the stocks that we make that are called what we call molded in, meaning like this right here, this wood looking stock, this isn't paint at all. This is the epoxy. We use different colored epoxies and we lay it in there to make this look.
Wow.
But like if you were to scratch this right now, that is the material. That is the epoxy. There's no surface anything on there. These take a little longer because if there's some kind of blemish here, you can't just stick a big thing of gray in the middle. It looks like a big blob. You gotta make it. It's an artist thing. You gotta do it right. So these take longer. Molded in stocks can take anywhere from 3 to 5 months.
Okay.
Now, one of the things that we've been doing to try to make things easier on folks that know what they want is we make a lot of spec stocks. And so we make a lot of stocks that we end up putting on our online store that are ready to go right now. Now, the challenge with those is, color. Does the person like the color? Does the person like that? Is that particular stock what they want? Is it for the right action? Does it have the right, as far as the ports and all that kind of stuff? So you have to guess a little bit. But because the whole Amazon thing, because that is a reality, and because we've been doing it long enough that we do know that there are certain stocks that, you can pretty much, they just always sort of flow.
Yeah.
And so there are some stocks that we do keep on the online store, both in an ongoing configuration, like they'll always be available. And then we also have what we call limited editions. And the only reason they're limited is because we don't know if anybody's going to want it or not.
Yeah.
Right.
And if they want it, great, then we sell it and maybe we make another one. But if nobody wants it, then it's on there for a while. And then, because you never know. I mean, it's every conceivable action that we can inlet for, every conceivable color and all that. So, because yes, it is a very real problem and people do want it right now.
Yeah.
And so we do have some that are available right away, but there's the risk that it may not be precisely the color that somebody wants, or it may not be precisely the model that they want, or the right action. But if they do want something, paint can get done pretty quick. Molded in takes a little bit longer, but that's about where we sit right now. Or just
look to the section of your site where like the ready to go ones are.
Yeah,
right?
Those are the in stock, ready to ship now. Yep.
Okay.
If you go to our online store, we've got about 400 stocks.
There's a lot more. I've noticed in the past there wasn't quite as many, but right now there's a lot of stocks that are in stock, ready to go.
Yeah,
different colors, different actions.
If we're doing that on purpose.
Yeah, that's what it's felt like. Like if you needed a stock and you have a pretty standard action, you'd probably be able to get something.
And one of the things that we're sort of slow to the party in one sense. Many of the other brands have basically their spec built. They have this particular stock done in this way. These are the hardware, a couple different colors. It's fairly limited. We believe and have believed for a long time that we wanted to offer what people wanted, the specifics, all the various individual details. Well, so when it was suggested to us that McMillan make what we refer to as a universal, it was weird because it's like, well, you can see the obvious appeal to it being that it can be used for a lot of different things, but that's really contrary to what McMillan is as a brand. We tailor stocks to things.
Yeah.
We don't make a one size fits all, or at least we didn't.
Yeah.
So now I think there are 4 or 5 different models that come in what we call a universal configuration. So the inlet, this line here, where you normally see the notch for the port, it's cut all the way down, like down to the bottom. So this entire line is below the port level, so you don't have to worry about where the port is. It's cut down here, so you don't have to worry about where the notch is. It's down there as well. The barrel channel is usually like for an MTU or something big, so anything fits in it.
Yeah.
So we do have some stocks that are listed as being universals that are intended to be Remington 700.
Just like a
Remington 700, yeah. With a standard barrel channel for that reason. And that and I say that it's good that we have it for those customers that need it, but admittedly, internally, it's sort of a hard thing for us to process because it feels sort of like against the grain. Yeah. But one thing I believe personally very strongly, and a lot of us do, but this is part of my mission as the person that I am with the company, is we listen to our customers. And if that's what our customers are asking for, what we want is only as important as as what we can get customers excited about. So if that's what they want and it's consistent and it's persistent, that's what we do.
And it does seem like the industry, or just people in general with firearms, are getting where they can go buy a rifle off the shelf, use the rifle a couple times. We have a guy here who's doing this exact same thing for our article series. And then they want to, I'm going to put a different stock in this. I bet this will be more comfortable or more practical. I'm going to put a different trigger in it. And I think that's where that universal comes in, is like, well, I can go buy a McMillan today and have it in the next week that I know is going to fit, and it's still going to perform like a McMillan, which is, I think, a big deal for a lot of people.
We think so, and it's proving to be very popular. Matter of fact, there were those in the group that thought it would fail, only because we imagined that people would think of a universal McMillan as I'll use the word cheapy. It like feels lesser. Yeah, it's like you're not trying hard enough. At least that's how it felt. And so people were like, "Oh, nobody's going to want this," because when they think of McMillan, they think of the very close. Everything's very tight and close and all this kind of stuff. Well, it's very popular.
Yeah, what's funny?
Doing really well.
I can relate to that somewhat because we often think very highly. We just think differently sometimes of our own brand than the way our customers might. We become very close to it, and often we're misguided in some ways. And I think like the name that you guys have built with McMillan, the reputation that surrounds it, and the performance there, it kind of stands on its own. And so like there's an attraction there that people are like, yeah, if it's simplifying the process for me, my 700 action, everything will just bolt right in. I don't even have to maybe bet it. But I think people still feel great about knowing they have a McMillan for all of the other qualities in build that you just went over too.
Yeah. We have a tendency to ask ourselves the way we say it is this an us problem?
Yeah.
And what we mean is this a problem that we're aware of because we're looking at it, like we're up close to it, and everybody else is generally unconcerned about it, but we are, because we know all the different connections. And
we say it's hard to read the label through the bottle, like from inside the bottle, especially on the wilderness athlete side. And we're literally sometimes scrutinizing the way we formulate stuff far too much, or how we, certain things. And oftentimes, customers aren't looking at things that way. Sometimes they are, and you can't market and can't build things for the same customer. Some people buy things and perceive things differently entirely. So you've got to be dynamic. And it seems like you guys have really done a great job of that on both sides of Defiance and McMillan. Like, I mean, really delivering that ready to go option, but then also that very customizable guy that just wants to, maybe he's retired or maybe he just has a lot of time on his hands to pour over the detail of every, bolt knob and every option he could possibly want. But that's really cool. I mean, I think that's kind of the secret, is just be adaptable, especially in a market like we're in. Like the shooting community, like you touched on a handful of ways where not even just the application, how it's changed, but the way we're shooting. All of these different things are constantly evolving, and if you're not evolving with it, then you're not going to succeed.
Well, and I agree with you, and I think in one way, a way that the market is evolving that's hard to keep up with is personal tastes.
Yeah.
And what people are excited about or not excited about, and how that and it cycles back and it comes and goes. But yeah, it's a very tough. It's a very tough thing to sort out, and it's tough to help people understand. Like some people, it gets really frustrating when you see people get excited about things that isn't performance.
Yeah.
Like, it's sort of flash in the pan, or it's kitschy, or it's, and
welcome to the supplement industry.
Oh gosh, I can only imagine. Yeah.
Hunting industry.
So many damn fads that don't make a damn bit of difference.
Yeah.
And sometimes go the opposite direction. That's actually almost worse for you.
Yeah.
And I won't get into that. But
it's a real challenge, and to keep up with not just what is good in terms of genuine performance, but one thing that I've learned is that typically people who are really good at doing the performance side of what they do aren't usually as good talking about it. And that's been my experience, is that's the result of they're usually pretty critical people, and they're so hard on themselves and on what they do that's the focus. Matter of fact, I'll say this to people at times, like a team shooter, I'll tell them, I'm like, look, if everything's going great, wonderful. You don't have to say anything to me, because that's what's supposed to happen. Yeah. It's when things go wrong, and when you see something you don't like, that's what I want to know about. Well, that's all good and well, but what that also further sheds light on is all I ever think about is negative stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All I think about is what are our weaknesses? Where could we get better? And so then when it comes time to talk about it in a way that's supposed to excite your customers, the only thoughts going through my head are everything we got to fix.
Yep.
And so it makes it hard to shift that gear and then get into, well, here's all the cool and exciting things about us.
Yeah.
Because you know those too. I mean, those, it's not that they're not real. Mm-hmm. It's just, it tends to be the focus of people who do things well tends to be on those things that are going wrong and on things that are tough.
We battle with that. And it's actually just this morning meeting. We always have Monday morning meetings, and we oscillate from the hypercritical things where we're just trying to overcome obstacles and all of the businesses we're running. But like this morning, all about our wins. What were all the wins that all our businesses had in October, and like literally just focusing on that begins to shift your perception. We need a little bit of a paradigm shift, and it affects the way you approach your day, because it's very easy in any one of these businesses to just be hypercritical and, nitpick at all of the things. And while that has its merit it has its point too. Then it kind of can work against you. And then there's just you have frictions everywhere you go in your work. So, Eric, what's next? So in terms of like you don't have to get into anything, divulge too much, but big picture, what can the community expect to see, differently, better, or new from both these?
Well, we're doing a lot of exciting stuff. So Defiance, and we're going into some new directions too. Defiance just recently released a filigree action. We've partnered with the local up in the Flathead Valley who does outstanding filigree work. And so that's not a performance thing.
I saw something on, what was his name? I saw something on Instagram.
His name's Elijah.
It was gorgeous.
Yeah, it's Flathead Valley Precision.
Yeah,
gorgeous. I saw that.
Yeah. And he's an artist, and he hand draws all that, and he spent quite a lot of time putting that particular one together. And we're going to be doing more with him. So that's just an exciting, and we're doing some more stuff. One of the things about our actions, if you look at our website, is they're all fairly straightforward. They're either metal looking or black looking.
Yeah.
So, in order to help people understand the variety and certainly at competitions, not so much hunting, but at competitions, when you see all the rifles laid out, you see a lot of race cars.
Yeah.
So a lot of Cerakote, a lot of fun things. So we're helping people understand that there's some fun in there too that they can have. And those are all cosmetic. We do have, we've recently have the CRF action that we've recently released. It's a modified CRF, so it also has a push feed capability. So this one's very exciting. We are playing with some new actions that I won't tease too much because I don't want to get people mad, but they're going in a new direction for us. And so that we're doing both new products, new features, new functions. We're getting really deep in the weeds of this timed and tuned thing. We're really gonna quantify it and make it more attainable.
I'm very excited about that.
I mean, that seems like it could have the biggest leap in performance and customer experience in terms of.
We want to make it something that's predictable and achievable. Like it's a deliberate thing that you're actually you're going to get rather than maybe this action works, maybe it doesn't kind of thing. So we're really running that down. That's becoming a big part of it. So that's the fun stuff on the action side. On the stock side, it's going to be interesting when we go about a year or two in the future to look back on all the things we're doing. Varian has some exciting stuff coming up with some collaborators. So we're working actually with a number of shooters and builders to come up with some new styles and some new approaches. And we're going down that direction. We're probably going to have maybe 6 or 8 new stocks coming out over the next 2 years. A lot of really exciting things. And we're exploring also different ways to do it because we know they're expensive. We recognize that. Now, we will not. There's an absolute requirement. It has to be as good or better. Any changes we make have to be as good or better. So we are looking at some ways to do some things. We're doing some experiments. If they work out, those could be some really exciting advancements in stock manufacturing that wouldn't be quite as expensive. If they don't, there is a possibility that we could start a separate line, that has a lower price point that doesn't have quite the same robust battle-proven sole as the current McMillan line, but it'll have a more affordable price point and be practical for most people, that kind of thing. So we're doing a lot, and we're just very excited, and we're just going to keep things going.
That is so exciting. That is so exciting.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Eric. It's been a pleasure. It's been a wealth of information, and there's still a lot more to know. I guess I would encourage all of our listeners, no matter if they're a seasoned shooter or a beginning shooter, take a look at building a rifle with some of these components or both. I mean, you'll absolutely feel the difference. I mean, if nothing else, it'll deepen your understanding and appreciation for this level of craftsmanship when it comes to how actions and stocks and how a rifle can feel. I know when my eyes were opened, spending years shooting some great rifles, but nothing but these level of components to it. It is quite of a different experience, and it makes shooting a lot more fun again, especially if you get a chance to do it in like a match format. And if anybody cares to read a little bit more about either the Defiance team, their manufacturing process, I wrote an article in our Made in America series that will be in issue 6. It'll be in issue 1. It'll be in issue 1, so it'll come out. It'll hit mailboxes in January of 2026. So still time to get a subscription to the magazine in to read that article. I did a similar piece on McMillan stocks and their team on the 5th issue of 2025, and we still have plenty of those back issues if someone wanted to order one or just to get a subscription. So I think one of the coolest parts about both brands and any brand that I choose to spend money with is the people, the story, how they go about doing business, and that means a lot to me. So, that's kind of the focus of those articles, is just help people get a bit of a bigger picture about what these companies are all about, not just the products. And Eric, I think you're a great representation of that. I think you're an awesome person. You've got a ton of experience, and I'm anxious to just chat with you more over time and learn more about these products. And it's great that you're here in the Valley, because I could probably just pick your brain and come in and see you guys up there in North Phoenix sometime. So thank you again for joining us.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me. I very much appreciate it. And there's some wonderful articles. I was very impressed with how they were written, and excellent work.
Thank you. Well, thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah.
Hopefully by the time you listen to this, there's issue 6, well, issue 1 is maybe hitting. I'm not really sure when we're going to upload this.
Well, I don't know
I feel
when
like
we'll
we might
upload
upload this soon. Like I
Yeah,
feel like this
yeah.
is before that. So
Yeah, I think you'll be looking at issue 6 when this gets uploaded.
yeah, and it's a gorgeous issue. So, anyways, that'll be it for now. We're signing off. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, make sure to subscribe if you like what you're hearing.